This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ever since humanity existed, and it's going to become more and more interconnected.
And there is one future: either we succeed together or we fail together.
Nagyszerű kezdeményezés. Én azt gondolom, hogy minden ország számára ez egy megkerülhetetlen tényező és figyelmet érdemel a világban.
Greater prosperity, greater harmony is something that I think is very important.
Hello and welcome to today's special program, One World, Shared Future. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Not all seeds that are planted become tall trees giving shade and fruits, but the ones we're talking about today have arguably taken roots worldwide. 10 years ago, Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed forging a community with a shared future for mankind, where we all share a common destiny, grow and prosper together. A recent example is the China-brokered rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The two countries decided to re-establish diplomatic relations through China's mediation. So, as it marks the 10th anniversary of this important concept, the shared future is being explored by more countries and more scholars from the West. Can this concept prevail when competition, even rivalry, is rife? With Chinese modernization making extraordinary headway and the myth that modernization equates westernization debunked, what does it mean for the world? I'm honored to be joined by distinguished guests from different parts of the world sharing their insights on today's topic and in today's forum. First of all, let's loop in two guests from Europe. In Oslo, we have our old friend Erik Solheim, convener of the BRIGC Advisory Committee and former UN Under-Secretary General. He's also an advisor to the World Resources Institute. And also in London, we have John Ross, Senior Fellow at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. John is also a former Director of Economic Policy for the Mayor of London. Gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you. Erik, we're marking the 10th anniversary of the concept of building a community with a shared future for mankind. How do you see this concept being operationalized over the past decade?
I think this concept is critically important because all major issues of our time, whether peace, environment, economic recovery after COVID, bringing everyone out of poverty, all major issues of our time need us to work together. The most important relationship is that between China and the US, but it also includes Europe, Africa, India, every part of the world. So we need to work together, and there is one future: either we succeed together or we fail together. That's the core of that concept. The main way of operationalizing it from China's side is supposed to be Belt and Road. I consider Belt and Road so far an astonishing success. It has built, say, the railroad just from Laos to China, making landlocked Laos connected to the world grid of railroads. There have been the railroad in Ethiopia, in Kenya, the Bandung-Jakarta railroad in Indonesia, metro in Hanoi. There are so many astonishing results of Belt and Road. So we should look a bit aside from all the criticisms. There is always something to criticize. Overall, it has been a great success, focusing on infrastructure, but also on peoples-to-peoples contact.
Erik, you have been a keen observer of growing initiatives worldwide, especially recently in China. Where do you see the possibilities of global cooperation to create what China calls an ecological civilization? What specific expertise can different regions contribute? Can green collaboration rise above politics, in your opinion?
It needs to, because it's so important. There is one climate on planet Earth. It's not an American or a Chinese or a European climate. We need to reduce the very, very rapid speed of global warming together. And look, China these days have superb experience in key areas. No nation ever in history has brought down pollution at the speed China has done in the last one decade. I mean, 10 years ago, Beijing, Tianjin were heavily populated cities, basically sometimes like hell. Now you can see the sky, the blue sky in these cities, brilliant, and that expertise can be shared with other nations. But China is also, maybe not so visible to everyone, now a world leader of conservation of nature with great national parks and with schemes and programs for tree planting, which are absolutely world-class. President Xi has promised that China will plant an area the size of Belgium every year from now to 2030. That is astonishing, and it can inspire others.
China is working with many countries in that front. Now, John, let me turn to you. China's 2 sessions have set a target for China's GDP in the year 2023. It is around 5%, which some regard as a low point in China's growth. Does it mean China's growth engine is being compromised? And because you earlier said that from one of the poorest countries in the world, China would become a high-income country by 2023. What is your assessment now?
Yeah, that will roughly be. It'll be either this year or next year. It really depends on the exchange rate, which nobody's able to predict totally accurately, because if they could, they'd be so rich that they'd make everybody, all the billionaires, look like paupers. So nobody is capable of absolutely accurately predicting the exchange rate, which is technically for the level that China has to get to be a high-income economy. But from the point of view of growth, there's no doubt what is taking place. If we take during the pandemic, take the 3 years of the pandemic, China's growth is slightly above 13%. The US is slightly above 5%. That means China's grown 2.5 times as fast as the United States. If you look at China's projections to 2035, which is to double GDP and GDP per capita compared to 2020, that requires a 4.6% growth rate to be achieved at average each year. So 5% is actually slightly above that. So there's no doubt on these processes that China will achieve this, the doubling of GDP by capita by 2035. And 5%, around 5%, is still going to be much faster than any of the Western economies, than the United States or the EU. I mean, if you take the comparison to the EU, during the pandemic, China's grown 6 times as fast as the EU. And if you look at it from the proportion of world output that China's accounted for during the pandemic period, it's about 36%, about double that, which is for the United States. So China will continue to be overwhelmingly the main dominant motive force of the development of the world economy during the next period at a 5% growth rate.
All right, thanks for this analysis. Erik, a global community means greater people-to-people exchanges, and you have been advocating the benefits of tourism. You now have a new title, that is International Climate Advisor to the Sri Lankan President. And you said in January that 150 million tourists left China the year before COVID, and tourism from China will soon resume, or at least that's the hope. Huge opportunities for countries like Sri Lanka. How do you see tourism post-COVID in helping developing nations that are facing an economic crisis? What could be Chinese tourists' role in that?
First of all, there is reason for optimism in Sri Lanka now. It's a deep, deep economic crisis where many, many people have lost a lot in Sri Lanka. But the reason for optimism comes from global cooperation, because debt relief for Sri Lanka is now promised by the President Xi of China, by Prime Minister Modi of India, and by the International Monetary Fund, all of them working together to help Sri Lanka. So that shows in just one nation how important international cooperation is. This is a tourist-dependent economy, and all tourists left during COVID. Now, hopefully, it can come back, and China is the main tourist-producing nation in the world. Look, there are millions upon millions of young people in the world, in India, in Africa, all over, who need jobs. They're desperate for jobs. They want decent, well-paid, good jobs. One area which can provide that is tourism. Because tourism, you can, if you make a car factory, you can do everything by robots. Even the smallest hotel needs staff. Otherwise, you cannot serve the beer. You cannot make the beds. So you need an enormous amount of staff for tourism, so it creates jobs. That's one of the reasons why tourism is so important. And I just encourage Chinese tourism to look into Sri Lanka, but many other developing countries also, for the fantastic culture, great food, great beaches, fantastic nature, so much to explore. China in itself, of course, can benefit from domestic tourism also. But Chinese going abroad is a major potential source of income for African and other Asian developing countries. So please go abroad, please spend money, and please that way also help developing countries.
However, with climate crisis deepening, we have to ensure that tourism is sustainable and it is not compromising local environment and the environmental issues are not aggravated. Also, we have to keep safety features in mind. How would you advocate approaching tourism in the new era? What are some of the do's and don'ts?
The most important, of course, is to protect the main sites where many tourists want to come, whether these are culture sites like temples or castles or whatever it is, or tourist nature site like national parks. They need to be good protected so that tourism are not spreading over and destroying the sites. That's critical. Then, of course, the tourist industry need to be zero carbon, make sure that they don't emit a lot of carbon from the hotels, that we move into electric cars in the long run, into electric or hydrogen flights. So we need to reduce the carbon footprint and the impact on environment from tourists.
John, your book, China's Great Road, in that book you said the sheer scale of China's developments and its consequences for humanity is huge. It's also about China's interconnection with other countries, especially with the global south. But to create a global community with shared future, it is not enough for the global south to come together only. The global north, arguably, has to be also involved. How successful or unsuccessful do you think China has been in achieving that? And do you think such unity will eventually happen?
Well, yes, I think it eventually will happen because it's in the interest of the people in the global north. The problems that have been created in this haven't been created by China. Unfortunately, they've been created by the United States. As I mentioned earlier, you have a sort of regression to protectionism in the United States, which was launched under Trump. And unfortunately, although Biden doesn't put forward the same type of protectionist rhetoric as Trump did, unfortunately, he hasn't got rid of the tariffs and other impediments to trade. But this is very damaging to the people of the global north. I mean, if you take Huawei, for example, Huawei had a plan for a £1 billion research and development facility to be developed in Cambridge. That would have created very, very highly paid jobs because this is a center of high technology. Very jobs that would really great. It would have strengthened Cambridge as a scientific centre. Well, Huawei de facto now has cancelled it. Well, why should it? If it's not allowed to participate in Britain's development of telecommunications due to US pressure, this is shooting yourself in the foot. It's damaging. Countries don't want to go along with it. And unfortunately, the obstacles have not come from the United States. So we just have to continue to argue for more rational policies. And I believe in the end, self-interest will come through and people will stop all these damaging activities.
Yeah, John, back to our main topic today. How would you compare the Chinese concept of building a community with a shared future? How would you compare it with previous paradigms proposed by Western scholars or by scholars and policymakers in other parts of the world?
Well, it's very original. It's because in the following sense, it encapsulates and puts into a single concept things which were known before. It's very profound sense of this point that the progress of humanity is based upon the increase in division of labor, or so socialist terms called the socialization of labor, but they're exactly the same concept. And this is the whole development of humanity ever since humanity existed. Humanity came into being in very small groups. It then formed countries, it formed empires, and it has now formed an interconnected global world, and it's going to become more and more interconnected. But what had not been done was to draw out the political conclusions and draw them together in a single concept. And this is important then, because then this allows you to follow these policies more consistently. So therefore, this concept is, on the one hand, it builds on what went before, the correct things which went before, but it's extremely original. I think, therefore, it's a very profound idea, and it should be studied throughout the world. I mean this very seriously. You know, basically, American universities should be teaching their students this type of thing.
Erik, what are your thoughts on this Chinese concept, the community with shared future? I mean, once again, how would you compare it against the other previous paradigm?
I think it's, as we have just heard, it's a great summary of global wisdom. It's not new. I mean, in the old Vedas in India, 2,500 years back, they say the whole universe is one family. That's basically the same. We need to work together if we want to achieve a better world for everyone. It's also deeply rooted, of course, in Confucianism. It is all about how you create a society with harmony between people. So it's not new, but it's a new expression of a very important thought. The biggest problem we do have is that certain circles in the United States believe that they can export their political system to the entire world. But let's be fair, the American political system have worked fairly well for America. It's a prosperous nation, and with some difficulties in the last years, has been a shining democracy for the last 100 years. Some hypocrisy, yes, but largely has worked well for America. That's not to say that should be exported to the rest of the world. There are very different systems. The Chinese system is for sure different. I am absolutely certain that China will not in the next 50 years adopt the American system, but nor will America adopt the Chinese system. In India, Hinduism is very close to people's hearts, but they don't want to export Hinduism to the entire world. So we need to get rid of this idea that someone should export their system into a world where we work together for common purposes, even on the basis of different systems. That's the future, and that's what's also encompassed in a word of shared prosperity or shared future, because that can only be shared between people with different ideas, different religions, different political systems, but working together for common purposes.
Erik and John, thank you so much for coming on our show. Really appreciate it. Now for more perspectives, we also have Dr. Ciprián Farkas, Mayor of Sopron, joining us from Hungary. Dr. Ciprián Farkas, Mayor of Sopron, Hungary, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to CGTN.
Én is köszöntöm a kínai televízió nézőket, megtiszteltetés számomra, hogy az önök csatornájára adhatok nyilatkozatot.
Mayor Farkas, let's talk about municipal level cooperation. I know that Sopron and Yichang City in central China have a sister city program. How has this sister city program fared so far? I know the past 3 years have been difficult. What's your plan for the future when it comes to engaging with Yichang and more Chinese cities?
Yichanggal egy együttműködési megállapodást írtunk alá még több évvel ezelőtt, azonban a Covid-járvány és jelenleg az orosz-ukrán válság, amely Európába borzolja a kedélyeket, megakadályozta annak a lehetőségét, hogy ez az együttműködés kibontakozzon. Azonban továbbra is nyitottak vagyunk a kínai partnerekkel történő tárgyalásokra. Mi úgy hisszük, hogy az oktatás és a turizmus területén tudnánk együttműködni Yichanggal vagy bármely más kínai várossal.
Exactly. Last year, middle school students from 2 provinces in China, as well as those county in Hungary, namely Ogor, Mason, and Sopron, took part in an art competition. Can you tell us more about that? How did they go?
A középiskolák szintjén kialakult együttműködés nagyszerű, ezt ennek örülünk és támogatjuk, hiszen Győr-Moson-Sopron megye, ahol Sopron fekszik, testvértartománya Hubei tartománynak. A két tartomány székhelye, ugye Győr-Moson-Sopron megyének Győr, Hubeinek pedig Wuhan. Én úgy gondolom, hogy nagy lehetőségek mutatkoznak az együttműködés területén, hogyha oktatásról beszélünk, azonban Sopronban van egy faipari erdészeti egyetem, Magyarországon az egyetlen olyan egyetem, ahol erdőmérnöki és faipari mérnöki végzettséget lehet szerezni, és én úgy gondolom, hogy a kínai oktatási intézményekkel vagy cégekkel az felsőoktatás tekintetében itt mutatkozna még együttműködési lehetőség, amelyet mi Sopronban minden eszközünkkel támogatjuk.
So when it comes to tourism, what do Chinese tourists mean to the tourism industry, to your city and to Hungary as a whole, but to your city in particular?
A kínaiakat mindig szeretettel látjuk, hiszen a bécsi nemzetközi repülőtér az 50 kilométerre található Soprontól, és Budapestről is 2 óra autóval eljutni Sopronba. Ez nem távolság, nem igazán nagy idő, nem nagyon kényelmetlen dolog Sopronban eljutni, és mi úgy tapasztaljuk, hogy az ázsiai emberek, és aztán különösen a kínai emberek tekintetében az a csoda, amit Sopron jelent, az a középkori városmag és az a környezet, ahol ez a város fekszik, el szokta nyerni a tetszésüket, és talán azzal sem árulok el nagy titkot, hogyha elmondom azt, hogy Sopron nagyon híres a vörösboráról, európai viszonylatban is nevezetesek vagyunk erről. Én úgy gondolom, hogy ez az ázsiai emberek tetszését is el tudja nyerni.
Mayor Farkas, we know that Hungary was actually among the first European countries to join the Belt and Road Initiative in 2015. How are you looking at this Chinese initiative? Is there in any way the city of Sopron is feeling the impact of this initiative?
Mi nagy reményeket fűzünk a Sejm út programhoz, hiszen itt az áruknak az áramlása keletről nyugatra nagy lehetőségeket teremt számunkra itt Sopronban is. Mi ezen a területen is várjuk a kínai partnerek megjelenését és együttműködését, minden eszközzel támogatjuk őket, amennyiben Sopronba jönnek, és ott szeretnének gazdasági tevékenységet folytatni.
How are you looking at China's many initiatives in the world these days, from the global security initiative, global development initiative, global civilizations initiative, to the Belt and Road initiative? Really, how do you look at China's role in the world?
Nézze, Magyarország szempontjából Kína megkerülhetetlen partner, hiszen jól tudjuk, hogy 2020-ban például a legtöbb külföldi befektetés Kínából érkezett Magyarországra. De én azt gondolom, hogy Kína világban betöltött szerepe arra predesztinálja, hogy a világ összes országának partnere lehet Kína potenciálisan. Kínával jó együttműködni, Kínával kifizetődő együttműködni, hiszen olyan jelentős gyártási kapacitás halmozódott fel Kínában, amelyet Kína birtokol, hogy gyakorlatilag megkerülhetetlenné tette a Kínával való partneri kapcsolatok kialakítását bárki számára.
Any thoughts and hopes for the future of the relations between Sopron and Chinese cities, and as well as between China and Hungary?
Mi magyarok különösen kedveljük a kínaiakat, a kínai gasztronómiát, és a kínai kultúra számunkra misztikusnak tűnik. Azt szeretnénk, hogyha a kínai emberek is minél nagyobb számban tudnák megismerni a magyar kultúrát és a magyar gasztronómiát, amely itt Európában azért meglehetősen ismert, és várjuk sok szeretettel a kínai turistákat Sopronban, diákokat, és mindenkit, aki Kínából jön felén gazdasági befektetések tekintetében, az oktatás területén vagy a turizmus vonatkozásában. Mindenkit szeretettel várunk Kínából.
So Mayor Farkas, for many years, China proposed building a community with a shared future for mankind. What's your understanding of this Chinese initiative, building a shared future for mankind?
Nagyszerű kezdeményezés. Én azt gondolom, hogy minden ország számára ez egy megkerülhetetlen tényező és figyelmet érdemel a világban. Én úgy hiszem, hogy a haladó és fejlődő országok, akik felelősséget éreznek a társadalomaik tekintetében, hogy egy fenntartható jövőt hagyjanak számukra örökül, azoknak csatlakozniuk kell mindenhez.
You know, Mr. Mayor, you'll be more than welcome to come back to China.
Megtisztelő, köszönöm szépen.
As relations between Beijing and Washington have become more tense and more complex, are Chinese Americans feeling the brunt? Will the Chinese philosophy of building a shared future help seek a common ground between the two? For more on this, let's hear from Joy Chen, CEO of the Multicultural Leadership Institute and former Deputy Mayor of Los Angeles. So Joy, you've been championing the cause of Asian Americans for many years and helping them climb up the corporate ladder of America. We know life is tough at the top, especially as a minority. How would you compare the situation now versus years ago? And do you think because of the pandemic and the subsequent Asian hate in many parts of the country, things are reversing a little bit?
The Asian American glass ceiling has been ongoing for, you could say, hundreds of years. I grew up as a child in America in the 1970s, watching my father struggle under the Asian American glass ceiling. You know, my father was born in China in Jiangxi province, and he went to MIT, where he studied a master's degree in engineering. And his entire 30-year career, he remained an individual contributor. the first line worker. He never moved up. Same thing with my mother. She's from China, and she went to Cornell University, another top university in China, and she also never moved up. So to me, the glass ceiling was something that I watched in my growing up years, and that really shaped me. It made me feel like I want to do something. I want to really figure out how American society actually works so that I could break through. And, I've been really gratified that I was able to break through. And now it's really my honor and my privilege to help other Asian Americans.
Joy, what do you think of the significance of Michelle Yeoh's winning the Oscars and the fact that the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once is doing so well, sweeping the Oscars, both in terms of the symbolism of it and also perhaps in a more substantive way for the elevation of Chinese Americans and Asian Americans and Chinese and Asians around the world, and especially in America?
That's a great question. I think that symbolically it's very important because Asians have never won until now. Michelle Yeoh is actually only the second woman of color to win this honor. And so I think that symbolically it's very important to say we won't be invisible anymore. Asians are stereotyped as the perpetual foreigners, just visible in American society. And so the symbolism of it is very powerful. I think substantively, it's very, very important also because I think that maybe Hollywood has always assumed that if we make a movie about Asians, it'll never sell, and that Asians are it's part of the stereotype of us as being perpetual foreigners. Like, Asians don't matter. Nobody really cares about Asians. It's too big of a financial risk to invest in movies about Asians. And what this shows is that Asian-themed movies can be very commercially successful. So I think the substance of this is also very important.
How do you feel about the current tensions across the Pacific Ocean between China and the United States? What are your hopes for this relationship going forward?
Well, I'm very concerned about these tensions. I feel that they're worse now than I've ever seen them in my life. And it would be so much better for peace and stability in our world and prosperity in our world for these two great powers to be able to get along well. I do hope that those of us who have experience in both sides, those of us who are bicultural, those of us who are bilingual, that maybe we can play a role in, stabilizing relations.
Finally, Joy, what do you think of the Chinese philosophy of seeking greater balance and greater harmony among peoples and between nations, creating this collective future together?
Greater prosperity, greater harmony is something that I think is very important. I mean, at the end of the day, there are things that divide us, there are cultural differences, but we're all people, right? And I think that there is much more that we have in common as humans on Earth than there are things that divide us.
Joy Chen, come back again, and it's so good to see you. And hopefully you'll come visit us at some point. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. I can't wait to come back. Thanks, Gwen. It's wonderful to be with you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. That'll do it for this special program, One World, Shared Future. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Our news coverage continues. Bye and take care.